The views and opinions of the guests of Veterans Archives do not reflect the views and opinions of Veterans Archives, its subsidiaries, or its partners. Hello and welcome to Veterans Archives. This is a podcast where you can learn about our military history in the words and voices of the men and women who lived and created it. I'm your host, Bill Krieger, and let's listen to our next story. Today is April 14th, 2022. I'm talking with Herb Elfring, who served in the United States Army during World War II. For the audience, I had been talking with Carolyn Bloodworth, and she had mentioned that you had worked at Consumers Energy, retired 35 years ago, and that you are a survivor of Pearl Harbor. And I wanted to talk with you and find out a little bit about who you are and what you did, not only at Consumers, but what it was like to be at Pearl Harbor on that day. Before we get there, I'd like to kind of find out where you started out, because from what I understand, you are not a Michigan native, but you come from Montana.
Actually born in South Dakota.
Well, okay. So you originally come from South Dakota.
I was born in South Dakota.
Okay.
Watertown on the farm in 1922, of course, and livelihood on the farm, of course, was, looking back on it, it seems like it was more or less day by day because there was no extra.
Right.
And when the dry years came in the early 30s, it took its toll, and my dad was not able to raise enough money to pay the interest on the mortgage, and we lost the farm. So we lost that farm in 1932, and it broke up the family. I stayed with my uncle, and my sister stayed with some other relatives, and then along comes 1933, and my sister heard about the Fort Peck Dam project being authorized in Montana across the Missouri River, and it so happened that we had my mother's sister's family that lived nearby, and also my grandmother, my mother's mother. And so we, my dad got, through my sister's influence, got the family together with an old Buick that he still had for some reason, and a trailer I guess we had left over from the sale of the farm, and headed for Montana.
Well, now that sounds like quite a journey. So if I understand, born in 1922, the stock market crashed, the Depression hit. So this project that you're talking about was that part of the CCC or the Civilian Conservation Corps?
I don't think it had any direct connection with any of them. It was a project that was probably in the mill all along, say in the early 30s, but finally got authorized in 1933.
Okay.
So we headed for Montana and got there with our grapes of wrath landmark, I guess you might say. And that was the days when the roads weren't blacktopped, and a lot of gravel roads and a lot of time on the road. And we finally got there and got to my aunt's place, and she put us all up for whatever reason, you know. And then the dam was authorized to be built in the fall of 1933, and my father luckily was one of the first common labor help hired on the project. And as a result, we moved from my aunt's place to a place closer to the project, and that's where that's where I lived then until I went to the country school, the 8th grade. My schooling was in a one-room schoolhouse for 8 years, both in South Dakota and Montana.
Well, that must have been quite an experience. That's everybody in the same room, basically, right?
Yeah.
From kindergarten all the way up.
All the way up, yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
So anyway, I graduated from the country school then, and from which we walked to school a couple of miles every day to school and back, you know. And in wintertime, didn't make any difference. So I started to high school then in Glasgow, Montana, which was about 12 miles from the project.
Mm-hmm.
So I would ride to work with my dad, catch the bus, and then ride the bus to Glasgow, about 12 miles away. So
that's quite a journey every day, and that's in the winter, summer, whatever,
yeah,
right?
every day, yeah. And of course, in Montana, the weather would get pretty severe in the wintertime. I experienced a couple of days of 63 degrees below zero in Montana.
Okay, so I got to stop you there.
Yeah.
When you started to say 63, I thought, well, that's warm weather. And then you said below zero. I can't even imagine 63 degrees below zero. That's cold.
That's awfully cold stuff.
Yes,
yeah,
it is.
Yeah. But it lasted for a couple of days. And that was only did it happen 1 year that way. But I don't recall what some of the other cold days were, but they're well in the 40s, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So you learn to live with it. But I would then ride to work with my dad, catch the bus, go on into Glasgow, Montana to the high school. And I did that for 2 years, the freshman and junior year. Of course, didn't have time to stay at school and play sports, so I did not get involved with sports of any kind. Then, as the project grew, they were able to open up a junior-senior class in high school at Fort Peck. So I finished my 2 years of high school at Fort Peck, Montana. And I graduated in 1939.
So it sounds to me like education was pretty important in your family, because it would have been very easy for you just to go to work and contribute and not continue your education. Well,
it's certainly something that I guess I had in mind, because my brother older than me did not go on to high school, you know. Mm-hmm. He rather find a job and work someplace, you know. So I graduated in 1939, and my oldest brother, was in the Navy, married, and lived in San Diego. And he invited me to come to San Diego to go to San Diego State. Well, it just happened that there was a family that was living near the project that we heard about that wanted to move to Sacramento, California. But they needed somebody to drive a small truck that they had along with them in the car and pulling a trailer, you know. So I wound up, I was 17 years old at the time, driving that truck from Montana, Fort Peck, Montana, to Sacramento, California.
Interesting coincidence, right?
Yeah.
Just so happens that they're kind of headed your way, and they needed your help.
Right.
That's pretty amazing.
So fortunately, we got there in one piece, and then I caught a bus on to San Diego, California, from Sacramento, and wound up starting to San Diego State as planned, and Well, as it turned out, it was in the second term because I was short on math projects to qualify to start as a freshman at San Diego State. So I worked for a bricklayer then as a hod carrier and took night classes in math in order to qualify to start San Diego State in January 1940. That all worked out okay, but while I was at San Diego State, I got acquainted with a fellow that was, or a student that was in the National Guard, the California National Guard.
Okay.
And this would be 1940, spring, early 1940s. And of course, at that time, dollars were hard to find, and we could go to drill on the weekend and earn an extra buck. And I actually had joined the National Guard in Montana when I was 16.
Really? So what's that all about?
Which was a common practice for young guys to do that, just to earn a little extra money, and they needed the recruits anyway, so it all worked out. Anyway, I went on to school then in the spring of 1940 at San Diego State, and also did drills in the California National Guard on the weekend. And the regiment did their summer 2 weeks encampments, which happened to be up in Washington. So we went up to an area of Fort Lewis, Washington, and conducted our 2 weeks of drill up there. Came back to San Diego. That'd be probably in June of 1940. Then along comes September 16th, 1940, and the California National Guard was activated full time. So now I'm in the Army.
Probably not what you were expecting.
That wasn't expected at all. So the whole regiment then was pulled into encampment there at Ventura, California. And in November 1940, the whole regiment was deployed to Hawaii, the island of Oahu, where Honolulu is.
So again, probably not what you were expecting.
No, not at all.
But not a bad thing, right? It's Hawaii.
Well, fortunately, it was Hawaii instead of the Philippines.
Yes.
Because had the regiment gone to the Philippines, we probably would have wound up on that Bataan Death March. So we were in Hawaii then a whole year before the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. But that's probably a kind of a misnomer in a way, because the Japanese hit every other military installation on the island, which included our Camp Malakoli, which was down the shoreline from Pearl Harbor a few miles. I don't know exactly how many.
So what were you doing in Hawaii? I know things were heating up around the world with the war that was going on, but why did they activate you, and why Hawaii of all places?
I don't really, I was a buck private at the time.
Well, that's true. They probably don't tell you these things, do they?
And totally new to the Army, you might say. And that theory never got down to my level, and at that level, I guess we weren't too inquisitive either at the time. So.
Right. So what did you do while you were there? Prior to the attack?
The regiment was made up of batteries, and San Diego was Battery A and was a searchlight battery. like Long Beach, I think they had automatic weapons battery, and then San Francisco probably what it was. It might have had the anti-aircraft guns, the big guns, and so it was called the 251st Coast Artillery Anti-Aircraft. So he had those different weapons for anti-aircraft use.
Okay.
And I think our intended use was to defend airfields for the most part. So the Japs hit Pearl Harbor, and of course, the term Pearl Harbor survivor doesn't apply to just the Navy.
Right. Which is interesting because when we think about Pearl Harbor, we think about the USS Arizona and we think about the Navy.
Yeah.
So I was a little surprised to find out that you were in the Army.
Yes. But the Japanese knew where every military installation was on the island, and they hit all of them. You know, Army, Navy, Marines, the whole gamut. You know, and Wheeler Field in the center of the island, and Schofield Barracks. They hit those. You know. So you did not have to be a sailor to be qualified as a Pearl Harbor survivor. In other words,
right, and that's some education for me. I didn't realize that. You know, interestingly enough, my son, probably 10 years ago, who was in the Army, just like his dad, was stationed at Schofield Barracks, and I'm not sure a whole lot's changed in all that time, although it might have gotten a little bit better. It was, from all accounts, it was it was a nice place to be, but it was a pretty tough place to be as well.
It's a huge installation there.
Yes.
I know that. Yeah, they take up a lot of territory. And there's an aircraft landing field there too.
So you're
called Wheeler Field. Yeah.
Okay. So you were in Hawaii, and you're doing your job. You're doing what you do there. And so what happened, kind of leading up to the attack, and then what happened during the attack? And
well, as time went on, radar was just coming into existence at that time, and the Battery A obtained a radar at that time, had big antennas, you know, and it was used to pick up airplanes, but the capability of it was limited to, I think, 40,000 yards, which is not very far away.
no, nothing compared to how far we can see out now. With
Right,
equipment,
exactly, yeah. So anyway, after we got to Hawaii in November 1940, why, we started out in pup tent, or not tents, but Army tents at Schofield Barracks, and then we moved to Camp Melancholy, which is down the shoreline from Pearl Harbor, and built our own camp out of lumber.
All right.
Rough lumber. And so that was called Camp Melancholy. And we would work building the camp in the morning and maybe doing some Army exercises of some kind in the afternoon, you know. And that went along just fine until the Japanese hit on December 7th, 1941. So that was a very quiet Sunday morning, as you've heard, no doubt. And I could hear the bombing down toward Pearl Harbor way, but didn't think too much about it, and thought the Navy must be having some kind of a war exercise of some kind down there.
Mm-hmm.
We were down the shoreline, but a little too far away to see the actual action. Definitely could hear the bombing, you know. The next thing I knew, I was reading the bulletin board on the corner of the barracks, and I could hear this plane coming, and didn't think too much about it. The next thing I knew, there was a line of strafing bullets that went right past me, about 15 feet away.
Well, that'll wake you up.
And it went across into the next battery area, and a fella got hit in the stomach, but lived.
Mm-hmm.
He lived. And then the word soon got out. First of all, the line of bullets went down, and I looked up and saw this plane and had a red ball on the fuselage, you know.
Yeah.
I thought, my God, that's a Japanese plane. What's it doing here, you know? Yeah. And that was a surprise attack on our camp. And then the word soon got out that we were under attack, and we all went to our designated positions, which at that time was this new radar that we got in.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was in the squad that was detailed to operate it. We got out to the radar, and I've been there just a little while. I had time to get the engine started for power to power up the radar, and I could hear this plane coming, you know, across the treetops. They really weren't trees, but they were more like shrubs.
Okay.
And we could hear it coming, saw it coming, and we all jumped on underneath the radar, and I could see, from where I was, I could see the plane coming, and it veered just a little bit as it opened up for some reason, and the line of bullets went between the radar and the power plant, and severed the power cable that supplied the power to the radar. That was another close call that morning.
Well, that's two.
That's two. So I don't know exactly how many zeros did any strafing on the camp, but anyway, that was two of them.
Mm-hmm. So now the radar is not going to operate because the cable's been
no, it
can't.
can't.
Okay.
But it wouldn't do any good. The purpose of it was not for daylight information. It was designed for picking up airplanes,
mm-hmm.
to be able to direct the anti-aircraft guns on the plane as we would light the searchlights and pick up the target.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what did you do from there?
Well, that day then it became real quiet, you know, and real quiet for several days after that. So we just went on about our Army job then of doing exercises, and along comes June of 1942, and we were deployed to the Fiji Islands. Again, our regimental main purpose is to defend airfields, actually. So they had built an airstrip on Fiji already,
mm-hmm.
and they were totally expecting the Japanese to get to Fiji Islands. So they deployed us down there to defend the airfield. And as it turned out, the Japanese never did get there, so we didn't see any action on Fiji. We got there in June of 1942, and were there until I think the fall of 1943.
All right.
But as time went on, I advanced from private to first class and sergeant and staff sergeant. And there was a infantry regiment on the island also that needed officers. And they ran 2 OCS 80-day schools there. They needed infantry officers, but for some reason they could use a few military
police,
military officers, not military police.
Oh, just general military officers.
Yeah.
Okay.
So another fellow in our regiment, not in our battery, was selected to go. In the second session, I was selected to go. So I became a second lieutenant in January 1943.
We kind of have that in common. I was enlisted for a while and then went to OCS to get my commission as an officer.
Uh-huh.
And so you got your commission, and then what happened?
Well, then I continued in the radar phase of the operation. So I became radar officer then. But for some reason, we didn't really get any updated radar equipment.
Oh.
So we were kind of stuck with that same old radar,
Mm-hmm.
However, I had a chance to go back up to Honolulu in about September 43 to a month of radar school. And while I was there, I met my brother that was in the infantry, had been up in Alaska with the 7th Division and was sent to the Hawaii for redeployment.
How was that reunion?
Well, that was a surprise to him and me too, of course. And while I was at school, one weekend I was riding the bus and I saw this soldier with a 7th Division patch on his uniform, and that's what I do. That's what my brother was in. So I had some previous friends from before we went to Fiji. I was visiting some previous friends, and he had some military connections, and so he took me out to where my brother's regiment was deployed. And so when I called on my brother, he was a total surprise to him, of course. But we had a chance to see each other during the month that I was there. And one weekend we decided to call home. And we did. And we talked for 15 minutes. And the bill was $75.
Let's take a quick break.
Veterans Archives is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and we rely on donations from our listeners. If you are enjoying these stories and would like to support our continued efforts, please go to www.veteransarchives.org and select the donate button. Thank you. That's a lot of money today. That's had to have been a lot of money.
That was
back
then. Yeah, that was more than a private would make it come out 3 months, I guess, something like that. Anyway, we were happy to have done that, of course. Then his regiment went on to the Philippines where he was injured and came out of it okay. But getting back to my own regiment there in Fiji, after my commission, later in 1943, we were deployed to the Solomon Islands.
Mm-hmm.
And we had just built an airstrip on the island of Bogerville. And we were deployed there to defend that airstrip. And action was not very much because we only were alerted a couple of times, you know, for trying to pick up Japanese planes that come over to annoy us, you know. Mm-hmm. But one thing that we did do there on Bogerville was we knew that the Japanese were still on the island, and also what they call G2, they got information that the Japs were going to make a counterattack on our location there, mm-hmm. and the Americal Division and I think the 37th different divisions were both there. So apparently they were properly alerted about the information the Japs were going to do, and they were going to make a night attack. And it was a cloudy night, and they asked us to prepare our searchlights for shining up on what would be probably anticipated as the front lines for the Japanese. Mm-hmm. And there was enough light reflected back down on the ground so that the infantry regiments could see the Japanese attackers coming in. See, and it took good care of the Jap attack because of that. Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. So not just searchlights, right? But you're actually able to illuminate the ground where they were coming in.
Yeah, right.
That's really advantageous that you guys were able to do that.
It was a big help. And fortunately, the searchlights didn't get damaged because of it either. So
that's good. That's very good.
Yeah.
So how long were you on? How long were you at Bogerville, and what did you do after that?
Bogerville, we got down there in 1944. We moved from. We were still on Bogerville then until 1944, and then in like December of '44 we were deployed to the Philippine Islands. And we the whole regiment was headed for Clark Field. Mm-hmm. That was the main military airstrip on the island of Luzon. Now on the way we experienced a kamikaze diver, and it happened to be the ship next to my ship. There were several ships in the convoy.
Uh-huh.
And it was an evening where they spotted this kamikaze diver, and I think every ship in the convoy was firing at it. The diver picked out his target as the ship next to mine. And when he come down to his target, he missed the target and landed just behind the target, very close to the stern, which indicated he might have gotten a little flak on his way down or something.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, the plane hit the water and broke into flames and sank, and no damage was done to his target.
Sounds like a lot of near misses while you were.
Yeah.
While you were in the Army.
Yeah.
You're a very fortunate man.
Well, I guess I didn't mention about a breakfast one morning on Bogerville, and I'd mentioned that there were still Japs on the island, you know, when we got there. And I suppose that was an Army 5-inch gun or something like that, a howitzer, landed right next to the breakfast
Like a chow
tent
hall?
that we had, yeah. And it was a dud. Yeah. that was a close call.
Oh, no doubt.
So anyway, on the way to the Philippines, we were not on a landing ship. It was a troop ship, and we crawled down the rope ladder into a landing craft to go ashore. And when it came to the shoreline, we ran into a sandbar, and the landing craft couldn't get all the way in, so we had to wade in. And from the sandbar, of course, the water got deeper before it got back on the shore. And some of us wound up with water up to our neck, wading into shore. But anyway, we all got in okay. And fortunately, because of so many guns shelling the shoreline that morning, why, there was no opposition at all getting ashore. So.
Well, that's fortunate. It sounds like between the sandbar and the water, at least you didn't have to deal with the enemy at that point.
Right, we didn't. Right. So that was very fortunate.
So you were on the Philippines?
We went there January 9th, 1945.
Okay.
And our job there, of course, was to defend the Clark Field airstrip. And the air activity that the Japs had has already been pretty much pushed north, so there was very little activity by the Japanese aircraft as far as bombing Luzon. And so we really didn't have any, very, very little to do on defending the airstrip on Clark Field airstrip on Luzon. As a result, we were kind of moved on down toward Manila to do various chores down there until July of 1945. Because I'd been overseas so long, I had a lot of what they call points.
Yes.
And I had enough points to go back to the U.S. for reassignment, which I chose to do in July of 1945. And I got there probably late July, I guess, because I was back home to Montana and on leave in August when the first bomb was dropped on Hiroshima. And then the second was dropped on the 9th of Nagasaki on the 9th of August, 1945. Why, I got a telegram from Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, to report for separation from the service already before the war was over in Japan.
Oh my gosh. So I wanted to ask though, so when you heard about the bombs being dropped on Japan, did you or did the people around you realize how big that was?
No, not at all, because, well, I was home on leave, of course.
Right.
And all we heard was the bombs were dropped. We didn't have any idea how devastating they were. At least I didn't. And the first one was on Hiroshima, and the second one was on Nagasaki.
But you knew something had happened because all of a sudden now they're going to process you for discharge.
Now, because I hadn't been able to take any leave, my official separation from the service was in November 1945, November 18th, after the Japanese surrendered in in September 1945.
Well, and getting back to the point system, it's interesting because I've heard other veterans talk about that. And at the height of World War II, even though there was a point system in place, well before you were able to rotate back to the States, they kind of suspended that. Like people thought they were going to come home, and then they didn't because the war was raging at that time, especially in Europe.
Oh yeah.
And on the ground there. So it was a great point system if it worked. But as you and I both know, it doesn't always happen the way we want it to in the military. That's for sure.
No, it doesn't.
So you go to Fort Leavenworth and you get processed for discharge, and now what?
Well, then I'm on my own, and what an empty feeling that really is, Here I'm turned out, no job or anything, no income, and so anyway.
Did you miss the guys? Because I remember being in the National Guard. I remember I did a combat deployment to Iraq. I was glad to come home, but there was a part of me that missed all those people I'd been hanging around with. How did that feel for you?
That's right, because I went in with a lot of young guys, high school kids, in September 1940. Yeah.
And you spent a lot of time
with them.
Yeah. Like, that was all you did was spend time with them, really.
Yeah.
Did you keep in contact with any of them?
I did for a lot of years, and they've all passed on now. I may be the only guy left from our Battery A. That was the 251st Coast Artillery. I could find out, but I don't know how. Yeah, I guess after all these years, it'd be hard to maybe track people down. But that's pretty amazing. We talked about you retired from Consumers Energy. So let's go back to you got out. Here you are, kind of on your own, no job, no nothing, and you got your paperwork in your hand. Yeah, here it is. It's probably August sometime, and it was a time when the Army and Navy, I guess, had a lot of planes to fly, but no reason to fly them anymore, Right. But they find excuses to go someplace. And I was able to get a ride to Florida on a military plane. Free ride, Oh, yes. And because my sister was there, and her husband, so I said, well, that'd be a good thing to do, just go over there and see my sister. While I was there, I think, oh, God, how can I get down to Trinidad to see my brother in the Navy? And so I went to Banana River, Florida, and got a seaplane to Puerto Rico. Was that a pretty exciting flight? Yeah, well, it was different, Yeah. Seaplane, yeah. A lot of noise when you land on the water, I noticed that. Mm-hmm. And from there, I was able to get a plane on into Trinidad. Saw my brother, saw him a few days, and I was able to catch an Army transport plane to Miami. And we got to Miami just ahead of a hurricane, so I experienced a hurricane in Miami. Oh my God! That would be 1945, about I guess that would be September sometime, I guess. Yeah, it's right around hurricane season, September, October. Right after Jeff surrendered. Yeah. Yeah. So from there I hitchhiked back up to Banana River, and how did I get over to Eglin Field, Army Field, Eglin Field? Yep. And anyway, I did, and from there I was able to catch an Army plane to Albuquerque, New Mexico, and another one to Glendale, California. Right back to where it all kind of started from. Well, I wanted to get back to San Diego because while I was in while I was in Trinidad, my brother was chief, and at that time the Navy had pilots that were chiefs. So, well, anyway, while I was there, it was decided that a plane should fly back to Bremerton, California for overhaul of some kind.
Mm-hmm.
And these two chiefs were designated to take that plane back. Well, anyway, and San Diego was one of their stopping off places. So I got to San Diego from Glendale, California, to visit my brother's wife, and while I was there, and they came into California as planned. I got on the plane one day then and headed for Bremerton, California, Washington, with these two chiefs.
Sounds like an adventure in the beginning.
We got as far as Long Beach, and we got socked in with weather for 3 days, and then didn't know really when we'd take off again. And somehow or another, I'd arranged a flight from the area to McCookfield, Nebraska, in the Army, an Army plane. And that's what I did. I went to Cookfield, Nebraska, and then I got up to Watertown, South Dakota, where my sister and her husband had a farm, and where I was born also.
So a complete circle now, right? You sound very resourceful, because it doesn't sound like you were buying tickets and planning this out. It was just getting there by chance.
It just happened.
What did it feel like to be back, kind of back to your roots, back where you came from?
Well, I'll tell you, the most touching sight I'll ever experience in my life, I think, was sailing underneath the Golden Gate Bridge on the way home in 1945. After leaving in 1940.
It's a long time to be away from home.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and I have to ask, so you spent a lot of time in flights going to visit family. How important is family to you, Herb?
I'd say very important. And the family is very close, even though we're spread out terribly. I have 2 sons here in Michigan, a son and daughter in Texas, and a daughter in Florida.
But it sounds like you spent your whole life, even though you were in the military and you were gone, it was so important to be with family. Even when your father lost the farm and your family was kind of split up, you kind of came back together.
Yeah.
That must have been kind of an amazing feeling to see them again.
Yeah, it was. But, you know, you just do what you have to do. And, of course, you grew up to that point without much of anything anyway, so hardship was very hard would have been for some people, but it didn't seem that bad to us, even though.
It seems like it was almost an opportunity for you in some ways.
Well, it was. It turned out to be an opportunity to get to Montana, and my dad to get employed and get the family back together. Yeah.
So you come home back to where everything started, and then what happened from there?
Well, I spent the fall then hunting pheasants in South Dakota pretty much.
That must have felt good.
It did.
It must have felt, I would even say great, maybe.
But of course there was no income anymore, and whatever I did on the farm, I was just free gratis for staying there, you know, with my sister and us. And so I had enrolled at the University of Michigan. So when fall came, I headed for Michigan.
So that's what brought you to Michigan?
Yeah, that's what brought me to Michigan.
All right. I was trying to figure out how the story was going to come around to Michigan, so you'd end up at U of M.
it was probably a couple of guys that I was in the service with that were Michiganders, and they talked Michigan. And seems like, what I tell people is, on the GI Bill, you could go any place. And so, why not go to the best? I tell them.
Now, my brother-in-law would agree with you. My brother-in-law, Louis, graduated from University of Michigan with a law degree. So he would agree with you to this day that he went to the best place that you could go to. So I'm going to make sure I pass that along to him. He'll get a chuckle out of it.
Yeah, well, they had a good football team in those days too, you know. So.
Sounds like they're coming back around.
Yeah, well, they hit a bad hump in the road there with Georgia, but anyway, Harbaugh's made a big change this past season, so that's safe.
Yeah. Well, and I think the Big Ten looks pretty good now. We're going to have some good football games for 2022.
Yeah.
So you're going to go to University of Michigan. I don't want to get too far off track here. So you get there, and now what? What did you study, and how was it to be there?
Well, I guess the fact that I was in radar during the war involved electricity a little bit. I decided just to take electrical engineering as a major. Now, to start with, because of the war veterans that have been away from school for so long, they had a refresher course that the university offered, starting in January of 46, and so I participated in that before I got into the real.
Well, I want to ask you a question too, because as a veteran, I didn't go to college, and I didn't get my bachelor's degree until I was 38. I didn't get my master's degree until I was 50. So everyone I went to school with was a heck of a lot younger than me and hadn't had some of the experiences that I had. And I wonder if you experienced it too, and what was that like for you?
Well, I feel that I never had the feeling of a kid out of high school going to college, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for the most part, veterans are just there to looking at it as a job preparation for sure, you know.
Yeah.
And we were more interested in getting the degree and getting out rather than taking part in a fraternity and all these other things that students like to get into.
Right. A little more serious about your education, maybe, than some others.
And also, I met my future wife, you know, and so we were married when I was a junior in college.
So how did you meet?
Well, I guess it was just at a dance. Just at a dance.
So did you ask her to dance, or did she ask you to dance?
Well, I don't
how did that work?
I'm sure I asked her to dance, yeah. So, but she was already a college graduate.
Oh.
Yeah. She was working at the Veteran Readjustment Center at the University of Michigan Hospital.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Now, was she a nurse? Or
no, she was just, I don't know why, I never can remember exactly what her major was, but she took a lot of histories of patients, you know.
Oh, okay.
And passed that on off the line, you know, for veterans that needed help.
So you met her at this dance? And
yeah.
I'm assuming you dated for a little while?
Well, then we dated and we finally got married in 1948. Yeah.
Okay. All right. And then you, it sounds like you've started your life a lot, right? You had your whole military career and all of that, and then you kind of went to college, and then you got married, and so you graduated from college. You're a married man. Now what?
Married man and a pregnant wife. And fortunately, I got a job with them. They weren't far.
So right out of college,
right out of college,
for consumers.
Yeah. And We had our first child 6 months after I started working.
That's exciting.
Started in February 50. February 50, and my oldest daughter was born in August of 50. Mm-hmm.
And what did you do at Consumers when you started there?
It was in the electric transmission engineering department.
Okay, so that's where you stayed your whole career.
The reason was because that's the only job, I guess, in the company that didn't spin out to the divisions for some reason or another. It was strictly all in the general office.
Oh,
so
very nice.
That's where I wound up.
So you had your daughter, and what's her name? If you don't mind my asking.
Carol.
Okay. And then, so you have more children, right?
I have 5. Yeah.
Yeah. I thought you had more than one.
Yeah, 5. Yeah, 3 boys, 2 girls.
Oh my gosh, that must have kept you busy.
Well, I guess it did. But we made some really good friends, like in bridge and pinochle, and I wound up with a boat out at the lake at Clark Lake at Consumers location out there.
Yes. Yep, I'm familiar with that.
Yeah. So I had a boat out there for years, and I had a good family life along with working here in Jackson. Yeah.
Yep. And you said now that you have 3 of your children still live in Michigan, or 2?
2 boys here in Michigan.
Okay.
A boy and a girl in Texas.
Okay.
And a girl in Florida.
Okay. And do you get together often? I know the last couple of years have been hard to do that, but other than that, you guys...
I don't know if you heard about it, but I was veteran of the day at the Rutgers football game in Ann Arbor this fall.
Well, Herb, I did not hear about that. Tell me about that. Going back to your alma mater as the veteran of the day, what was that like?
Well, it was touchy. My youngest son, who lives in Lansing, he was contacted because he's a U of M grad also. Mm-hmm. And they wanted to recognize an alum, Michigan grad.
And what better person than you, really, honestly.
So I was chosen to be veteran of the day that day. Put up on the screen on the game, with 3 of my grandkids next to me on the field, and 106,000 plus fans.
The big house gets
cheering for me. So
the big house gets loud, doesn't it?
Oh, it was a touching event.
And a good game.
Yeah, we won. We won the score, but we lost the game pretty much.
Yeah, well, that's true. But you did at the end of the day, the score.
Yeah.
Score was good. Rutgers put up a pretty good fight there.
So anyway, all 5 of the kids were able to come back for that occasion.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
It must have been great to have them all together at one time.
Yes, it was. And my youngest son arranged for tickets for all of them through people he knew and so forth and so forth. And I guess there was like 16 relatives of some kind of grandkids and great-grandkids. And
so how many grandkids and great-grandkids do you have?
I have 8 grandkids.
Uh-huh.
And 7 great-grandkids.
Must be pretty amazing to see your family grow and continue to grow like that.
It sure is, yeah.
So we were talking before we got on microphone, and you said that last year you hit that magic spot where you were retired for 35 years and you had worked for 35 years. So now we're turning that corner where you're going to have more time where you haven't been at work necessarily than you were at work. And how does that feel to be kind of in that situation?
Well, it feels good just to be taken care of here, for instance.
Yes.
And also, it feels good to have had investments that didn't look too bad to work. And I feel very comfortable for the rest of my life. Yeah.
Well, that's good. And in March is a pretty big milestone too.
Yes,
you turn 100.
Yes.
And that's an amazing feat, all in itself.
It is. It is. Yeah.
So I have to ask, you've lived quite a life. It doesn't sound like there's a whole lot of dull moments in your life.
Well, it's had its challenges, but it's also had its fantastic times too. We've had an excellent life here in Jackson, raising a family and working with consumers. A great company like Consumers.
Oh, yes. Well, and I wanted to ask too, so when you came to Jackson, did your wife continue working in Ann Arbor? Did she?
No, she was pregnant at the time I came, and the only job she's done then is she worked. What do we do every 10 years? Census.
Oh, census taker.
She worked during census taking in 1950. So she had her first child then in August, and she was a busy mother from then on.
I was going to say, with 5 children, it's not like she didn't have a job. Certainly, she worked very, very, very hard every day.
So it's very satisfactory.
Well, good. And something else I want to ask too is, what do you do to take care of yourself for your own personal well-being? I mean, someone doesn't live to be 100 and not take care of themselves. So what are some of the things that you do?
Well, it's almost to the point, well, what did I did?
Right. Well, that's true.
Yeah. I've always been fairly active, but I've never done anything with real big concentration, like running every day for 5 miles, for instance.
Right.
Yeah. So I've been active in golf and tennis and skiing, and I used to ride my bike quite a bit. And so I've done those little things, but never to the point of it doing me in, so to speak.
Right.
Yeah.
Enough to keep you active and healthy.
I guess so. And I probably have got some pretty good genes too, I suppose. I don't know.
It must be. It sounds like your family was very hardworking, and you can't be a farmer and not work hard.
You got that right. Yeah. So we've had, the family, my original family, have had its downfalls. Like my one sister was killed in a car crash, and another sister died at a young age of St. Vitus Dance in Montana, and the rest of them, I guess, all lived pretty good. And my oldest brother was 89 when he passed. My oldest sister was 97 when she passed. My brother, just older than me, had throat cancer because it was probably got it because of his work conditions, I suppose. He died when he was 65 or something like that. And I have one brother left. He just turned 90 in this past July, so I went to Montana to his 90th retirement.
Oh, that must have been nice to.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
To see him.
Yeah, his wife planned a 3-day affair, and there was a lot of family came back for the occasion. Yeah.
That's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
Well, just one last thing I wanted to ask you before we go, and that is, what message would you like to leave for people as a result of this podcast? I mean, you've lived an exciting life. You're coming up on 100 years old. What message would you like to give to the audience?
Well, it's kind of tough to give you a really good one, I suppose, because you don't really have that answer. I tend to let little things not bother me, for instance. If I don't get excited over what seemingly to me doesn't matter, And I think I've done things in moderation rather than concentrate on certain things in particular. I guess getting back to sports, when you add these years, your body just doesn't function like it did in your younger years. However, it works, but not necessarily to its best pass. But a year ago, this last August, my daughter and her husband from Florida were in. We'd been camping together, and we decided to play 9 holes of golf at Elfring Park here in town.
Yeah.
And on hole number 16 at the Elfring Park, I got a hole in one.
What in the world?
And that was my last day of golf that I've played.
always good to leave on success, right?
Well, I guess so. So this past year, I haven't even touched a golf club.
Hard to live up to the hole in one, right?
I think so. And they both, my daughter and her husband both saw it go in. So it was an exciting hole.
I guess. I've tried to play golf. I'm just not very good at it, and so I do other things.
Yeah.
But I do have golf clubs.
Well, I've played a lot of golf with good friends here in town. We would go away quite often in the spring of the year for a week of golf someplace, like in Florida or someplace. And it's been good. I should have taken lessons when I started. I didn't start until I came to work for Consumer Power in 1950.
It was probably an important game to know back then, wasn't it?
Well, everybody seemed to play, so the guys I was working with, they talked me into getting started.
And
exciting. I never took any lessons, which I should have taken, but I guess my one best day was that when I reached 80, I shot my score of 80 at the park.
Sounds like the park's been good to you.
It has been, yeah.
You couldn't have planned that any better.
No.
I don't know. All right. Well, thanks for taking time to sit and talk with me. This has been incredible for me.
Has it?
To talk with you. I just, I was telling somebody the other day that my grandfather lived a really different life. He grew up in Missouri and lived on a riverboat for a while, and then became a bootlegger. Bootlegged whiskey for a long time, but decided to move him and his family up to Michigan for work, and left his life of crime behind him. But he would always tell his stories, and my other cousins and everything really didn't want to hear Grandpa talk about the old days, right? But I loved to listen to his stories, and my only regret is that I didn't write them down or record them somehow, because, I mean, that he's gone now, and so are all of his stories except for what I remember him telling me. And people's lives are important. And I think the things that we have done on some level are important. And to capture all that and share it with others I think we can learn from the past, because we think we have it hard now, but it was hard then too.
Yeah.
And we persevere through all of it. And I think it's important for people to remember that yeah, we've had a pandemic for 2 years and we've been locked down, but there was a time when people didn't have jobs and people lost their homes and their livelihoods, and they persevered and they figured things out, and it was not easy. It was not, but in some ways it brought families closer together.
Yeah.
In some ways it made us better people. And I think it's so important for people to know that.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Veterans Archives, the podcast that brings you the story of the men and women who have created and lived our military history. If you or someone you know served in the military and would like to share your story with Veterans Archives, please go to www.veteransarchives.org, select the Apply Now button, and fill out our application, and someone will get right back with you. Veterans Archives is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and we rely on the donations of our listeners. If you are enjoying these stories and you support our efforts, please go to www.veteransarchives.org and select the Donate button. Any donation is certainly appreciated. Look for Veterans Archives on your favorite social media. We are on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. Just look for Veterans Archives. Like, follow, and share our page. We'd certainly appreciate it. If you or someone you know is a veteran and you are struggling with mental health issues, please dial 988 and select option 1 for the Veterans Crisis Hotline. Please be sure to tune in next time for the next episode of Veterans Archives.